Thank you, Olivia. Some of you may have noticed that Elliot Dickinson is not at the piano. Our music director, he's actually out of town this weekend, so Tanya McEwen is filling in. Well, thank you, Tanya. Then we got Michael Hilson back there on the bass guitar, and then Alvon Griffin on drums. Well, this is kind of a special weekend for me, and I hope it is for you too. It was actually 1 year ago, 52 weeks ago, on Sunday, November 19th, that we got acquainted. I was in for the weekend and interviewed with the board, did my first Sunday lesson to audition, and so it's been 1 year. So, yeah. Yeah. And what a journey we have taken in these first 10 months together. So, yes, so good morning. And, of course, it's Thanksgiving week. And, of course, you have the stereotype of Thanksgiving dinner. And, of course, all of the jokes and about, just this gathering of people around the table, extended family, the crazy uncle who lives in the attic. Just all of the... And then, of course, the disagreements that surface or the stuff. I know Carla had saw something on Facebook. She told me about it yesterday. She says, a woman said, last year, I declared that there would be no discussion of politics. I said, if anyone starts discussing politics, I'll start discussing sex. She said, it worked like a charm. So, I know whenever we do our new membership class, like I'll be doing this afternoon after the service, one of the things I talk about is family system theory. And the family system theory is they recognize that in psychology, that in any congregation, any denomination, there seems to be this undercurrent of healing in that we try to heal our family stuff, our sibling rivalries. We end up projecting our sibling stuff onto other people in the congregation. We start to project our authority stuff on the ministers. Just so people are aware when sometimes a conflict comes up, like, what's this all about? This doesn't seem to be anything about me. But then, of course, we have that yearly Thanksgiving dinner where we are sitting with the actual family that we grew up with, and all of the stuff starts to surface. And I know it's so easy. My dad, of course, passed away last year, but my mom, whenever I'm with my mom, I find myself sometimes being drawn back into those old patterns that I had when I was younger. The truth is, getting along with people is maybe 2% about what that personality is like and what their behavior is like. It's 98% about how we perceive their actions, perceive their assumptions, and we make assumptions about people. So, would I rather be right, or would I rather be happy? A lot of times we have this attachment to just proving that we're right, when in reality, sometimes happiness is compromise, or finding that common ground that we have. I want to read to you from the Gospel of Matthew, 22nd chapter, 34th verse. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they came together, and one of them, a lawyer, decided to ask Jesus a question to trick him. Teacher, which is the great commandment in the Scriptures? And Jesus said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the Scriptures. You'll notice that he said the second commandment is that you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I find a lot of times, depending upon the mood I'm in, I end up treating people according to my mood rather than being totally present, giving the full attention to the situation there, rather than thinking about what I'm going to say next or whatever. And earlier in my life, especially when I was dealing with unworthiness issues or even self-loathing, isn't it interesting that we tend to project that onto other people so that they can kind of confirm that assumption that we have about ourselves? The other thing that I notice in here is, love your neighbor as yourself, but it doesn't say anything about choosing who your neighbors will be. Sometimes we need to be dealing with people who we've had perhaps unpleasant experiences in the past. But the Gospel of Luke, 6th chapter, 22nd verse, Jesus says, love your enemies. Do good to those who spitefully use you. He didn't say this was going to be easy. And of course, I chose the title for today's lesson from the infamous words of Rodney King in 1992. Can't we all just get along? It's not all that easy, is it? But there is the concept of namaste or namaskar. You know, that sense of that I behold the Christ in you, or I behold the divine in you. And that also can be an interesting challenge. But of course it comes from, the Eastern tradition, especially in India. When people greet you, you really get the sense that they recognize that we're all spiritual beings having a human experience. They're acknowledging that you have the divinity within you as well. The question is, are we expressing it? And how often do we express it? It's very easy to express namaste to someone we like, but what about when we come across someone we go, yeah? That's when it's challenging to say, ooh, okay, God, show me the good in this situation. Show me the good in this person. Let me tell you a story about a woman that Carla and I met we served the congregation down in Hollywood, Florida from 2002 to 2006. And early on, several people were warning me about this woman named Hillary. And I said, well, what's wrong with Hillary? She says, well, she'll jump up in the middle of the lesson and start shouting. And so I thought, well, I should probably have a conversation with Hillary. And so, in talking with Hillary, I was like, what I discovered is first she's schizophrenic. And she, and she had grown up Mormon, and but she'd come to the Unity Church, and sometimes if she heard something that, especially if it kind of disagreed with her earlier upbringing, just like what I was talking about now, it's like, okay, we're all spiritual beings having a human experience. And I remember one Sunday I'm talking about Jesus, Jesus Christ and how we view Jesus Christ. And so at that point, Hillary, jumped up and said, well, if that's what you believe, I'm out of here, and so she's out of here and all. But in my conversation with Hillary, I said, Hillary, it sounds like, at those moments you get this impulse that you feel like you need to, declare what it is you're thinking or feeling. But, when you do that, you scare a lot of the people around you, and they get concerned about their safety. And I have a need to know that everybody's going to feel safe, and that we have some order, during the service. Would you be willing to, when you feel that impulse, just see if you can squelch it? Maybe we can talk about it later after the service. And so, as I mentioned, this one time she jumps up, oh, if that's what you believe, they're out of here. And it's going out there, and people are sitting like, and I said, take that feeling, whatever feeling is you have right now, change it to love, and radiate love to Hillary. I said, yes, she can be a challenging person to be around, but when I asked her, Hillary, why do you come here to Unity of Hollywood, Florida? And she said, well, they kicked me out of the Mormon church. I've tried other churches. They all kicked me out and told me. So when I come here, people welcome me. And she says, and what I realize is this is the first place where I've actually experienced the presence of God. Wow, And it was interesting as the years went by. I'd be in the office like I am here Wednesdays and Thursday afternoons, and she'd bring somebody in who she'd been talking about Unity with and wanted me to explain what Unity was about. So, she became our evangelist, just we gotta go, you gotta check this place out, And so she'd bring the people in, because I can imagine people who knew Hillary were wondering, well, are they all as crazy as she is? Or, yes, we're unitics, what do you expect, So yeah, we need to take an honest look at ourselves. What are our dark sides? What are our preferences? We've got preferences, and if we're not careful, we start auditioning people to be our friends because they have to meet our preferences. And as many people who have been married discovered how different it is in those first few months when you're dating compared to later in life, where suddenly, in the early on, it's like you're trying to build the case for or against, and afterwards, it's kind of like sometimes those things that you were against in those early months are the most endearing thing about the other person. You begin to understand that person's uniqueness. So regardless of our preferences, can we truly take the namaste, namaskar approach? And especially when we have those moments of like, what's this all about? God, show me the good in this. This is my opportunity for spiritual growth. And that's the big thing, the challenge to be willing to engage with people who are not like us or not agreeing with us. There's a human tendency to run into tribe because that's the way we were wired. And that's the way just a few hundred years ago we would operate. In clans or in tribes. And psychologists have discovered that we can feel like we really know about 150 people. So when our group grows beyond 150 people, there's an uneasiness that happens. And some of the Native American tribes, once they got to that size, they would actually kind of calve off another tribe, especially in the nomadic groups, so that these groups would remain small enough for people to really feel connected. But I look at these last 20 or 30 years in politics and the polarization that's happened. I mean, Ann Coulter, the pundit, released a book a few years back called How to Talk to a Liberal If You Must. And, it's amazed me that this undercurrent, or not undercurrent, it's very overt of like, don't even bother talking to the other people. Just stick with us, we'll tell you the way it is. Rather than having a conversation. So, well, when you say this, help me understand what you mean. What's your understanding of it, so that we're on the same page, or we can at least agree on the facts, rather than opinions. So, the question we have to ask ourselves over and over again is, am I coming from love, or am I coming from fear? A lot of people think it's love and hate, but no, hate is a reaction to fear. So how do we communicate? I'm going to have Duncan put up a slide. Marshall B. Rosenberg just passed away a couple of years ago, but he came up with this wonderful concept called nonviolent communication. And he's got books on it. We've got a book in the bookstore. One of his books is left after this 9 o'clock service. And he talks about how do we communicate with people so we're not putting other people on the defensive? And of course, a lot of this relates to the series we did, on fearless living and Eye of the Storm. But he says, just by walking through this progression, it's astounding how even in the hottest conflicts, he'd be able to mediate in agreement. And that was his job. I mean, he was worldwide known as being a mediator who'd come into some of the worst conflict situations, even like between the Jews and the Palestinians. He'd come in and help groups negotiate. So the first thing you do is you express your observation. Now, the key here is to express what you're actually observing and not attach a judgment to it. Then the second one is express how you feel about what you've observed. Then the third one is to express your need. It's like, okay, what's happening? You've observed it. You've expressed your feelings about it. So what is the need that you have, maybe sometimes deep down, about that you're trying to get filled here in this situation? And then the fourth one is to make a request to the other person. Just ask if they're willing to cooperate. Let me give an example. Let's say we have a family where they got a teenage son, and when he's in the living room and watching TV, he likes to take his socks off and just kind of plop them on the floor there, and then when he's done watching TV, he walks away and leaves the socks there. So, those of you who have parenting experience, how would you approach this situation? According to Marshall Rosenberg, he said, if the mother were to say, John, I noticed that you take your socks off when you're watching TV, you drop them on the floor, and then you leave and leave them sitting there on the floor. And then she would express how she felt about this. She goes, I feel irritated because, I try to keep the house as orderly as I can, and suddenly I'm blanking out on the need. Oh, her need. Okay, I just said that. I said how she felt about it and her need. That's why I kind of stuck myself there. And then her request is, Johnny, whenever you're done watching TV, will you pick up your socks and put them in the laundry hamper? And you see the difference instead of the mom coming in and saying, what are you doing here, Johnny? Look at that. That puts someone immediately on the defensive. Now, one of the things you need to realize about this, because I know Marshall Rosenberg said it's funny how many people come to this assuming that if you do this, you'll be able to manipulate the person to do what it is you want. And he says no, because they always have the option of saying no at the end of it. But at least you've kind of laid things out. So when we're in a situation, especially sitting around the Thanksgiving dinner table, can you just talk about, well, I've observed this, or you said that. This is how I feel about that, and my need is, whatever your need is, that I need to be compassionate towards other people, and then make your request. I know Carla and I learned this at Unity Seminary there before we graduated in 2002. Now, it's easier to do all of this if at first you're willing to remember that you're a spiritual being having a human experience. Get centered. Go to that center of your torso and feel that spiritual energy that just radiates from out there. Some people prefer to go to their heart in this situation, and that works too. Heart is, of course, the center of us feeling love. And, of course, love just pours forth, no limits, infinite quantity that each of us can give away in love. And that continuous flow of divine substance, as we call it in Unity, can be expressed as love, can be expressed as fulfillment of whatever our needs are. Without the realization that we're a spiritual being having a human experience, we live life just by our five senses. What we see is what we get. And when we take that kind of attitude towards life, things can begin to be unpleasant. And we are not fully demonstrating the things that we need in life. Like in Unity, the divine idea of prosperity. Full spectrum prosperity is having good health, an occupation we love to do, to have relationships that are healthy, whether they're our intimate relationships or even our work relationships, and then to have all of the money that we need, to make our way through a week, through the month, through the year. And so if we're choking off that attitude, especially when we're spending most of our time in fear, especially the fear that we're going to lose what we've got. Isn't it interesting that when someone expresses confusion, anger, depravity, fear, that you can almost hear that inner child in them saying, will somebody please love me? So if we're willing to, in any situation, say, God, show me the good in this. Show me the hurt that needs to be healed. Let me express love in this situation. Problem is that we're dealing with people. And that's the problem. We are dealing with people instead of dealing with persons. Yeah, as people, as human beings, we have certain things in common. But as each person or individual is trying to express their gifts, their passions, their talents, their need to be healed, their need to be loved, then we're talking about 7 billion different personalities here on this earth. Doesn't mean that you have to like everyone. The old line about, I love you, but I'm not liking you very much at this moment. And as one African-American celebrity once said about race relations, he says, look, I'm not asking you to come over and give me a hug. I'm just asking you to leave me alone. And sometimes that's the best thing we can do in a situation. Once we have engaged and we recognize, okay, well, we can agree to disagree. So we do. One gift we can give other people, though, is to not make a declaration of that their behavior that they're expressing right now, or their opinion that they're expressing right now, is their final answer. Because we all change. I know I've changed. I've changed so many times in my life. The concept, of course, in evangelical Christianity is, are you born again? And when Carla and I were living in Chicago, I had a guy say, have you been born again? And I said, yes, and again, and again, and again, and again, because each time we have growth, that spiritual growth, that new realization, that aha experience. Yeah, we've been born again. So, you don't have to condone disruptive behavior. You don't have to condone sociopaths. You don't even have to condone schizophrenics like my friend Hillary in Florida, down in Hollywood. But I'm going to have Duncan put up this week's takeaways. We've had the nonviolent communication steps up there. First, again, get centered. Or go to your heart space. And then use this nonviolent communication model. A lot of people just find how much it has helped in conflict situations. Be willing to see the divine in others and ask inside, just asking, God, show me the good in this. Show me the God in this situation. And then don't deal with people, deal with persons. I mentioned Hillary. Hillary's not with us anymore. Carla and I were down there in Hollywood, Florida, down there north of Miami between 2002 and 2006. And as I mentioned, I'd had an interesting relationship with Hillary, and then she stopped coming for a while. So I checked in over there, and I heard she was having some tests done in the hospital. And her husband contacted me a few months later and said, well, Hillary's been diagnosed with cancer, and she's got cancer spread throughout her body. Doctors aren't giving her much of a chance, but Hillary asked me if I would just call you and if you'd come over and talk with her. And so Carla and I did. We came over, and like I see in so many homes with someone who's, had their death sentence pronounced upon them, she had the sick bed in the living room and stuff. Well, Carla and I just sat with her, and we talked with her, and it's like, just tell me about how you're feeling, and so many people are scared when they're dying, and of course, as ministers, even with my family, I find people are willing to open up to me where they don't even want to open up to their family members because they're afraid of scaring them. So, we just talked about Hillary, and Hillary says, would you do my funeral? And I said, yeah, sure, I'll do your funeral. And it was interesting because when I went to her funeral, there were like about 200 people there. And you realize, wow, even though Hillary had this challenge in her personality, she had touched all of these lives. And that's what I often say at memorial services or at funeral services like that. It's like, what did you learn from this person? They've given you an example of who you either want to be or who you do not want to be. What are the lessons that we learn from other individuals? And as a rabid football fan, one of my memories of that day was that the former Pro Bowl quarterback of the Washington Redskins was at that, and he came up afterwards and talked to me about how much he was touched by the lesson. I'm like, you're Billy Kilmer. So at any rate. So many years ago in England, two brothers, Tom and Harry, father passed away, left them his estate, including his land. And they couldn't seem to agree on anything. And there was a creek that ran down the middle of the land. Each of them built a house on their side of the creek, decided that the land on that side of the creek would be Tom's, that side would be Harry's. And one day, Tom went to the carpenter in town. And he said, I'm just so sick of looking out my window and seeing Harry's house and seeing Harry. So what I want you to do is I want you to come over and I want you to build a fence on my side of the creek about 20 feet high so I don't have to look at Harry anymore. And the carpenter said, all right. And then Tom said, I'm going to leave town for a week while you do it. And then I want to come back and see how Harry feels about what I've done. So Tom went out of town. And when he came back a week later, he was kind of like, well, it'd be interesting to see what Harry's mood is. And then Tom started to feel a bit of a regret. So why did I do that? And as he came into town, Harry is on the street, and Harry's running towards him. Oh boy, and then Harry's waving and comes up to Tom. Says, Tom, what you did, that was so amazing. Here, lately I've just been feeling like, what do we need to do, so that we can be friends again? We grew up together as brothers. So thank you so much, Tom. And let's get together and talk more often. And Tom's like, and then he goes home and sees on the creek there is no 20-foot fence. Instead, the carpenter built a bridge across the creek between the two houses. And Tom went to the carpenter, and it's like, he says, I gotta thank you, but how did you know what to do? He said, well, I've observed you and Harry since you were kids, and everybody in town was just getting a little sick of your conflict. And I realized as a carpenter I've had a chance to build a lot of walls and a lot of fences, but it was fun for once to have a chance to build a bridge. So, observe the fences and the walls in your life, and be willing to build a bridge. Our closing Bible verse from the Gospel of Matthew, 22nd chapter, 36th verse. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the Scriptures? And Jesus said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all of your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the Scriptures. And may you always be open to God's guidance and grace. Let's prepare for meditation.